My 2021 fantasy football wide receiver rankings are here. We got my top 50, 5-0, boom, boom, boom. That's what we got for you guys today. I'm going to go through all of them, not talk about all of them too much, but I want you guys to see all my rankings. Now, for consistency's sake, I know a lot of people playing standard leagues, a lot of people playing PPR leagues. We can kind of mush them together, do half PPR rankings, but I think it won't really change how I feel. Now, obviously, injuries play a role into this. We've seen even Jamar Chase, who's not injury prone, he's just dropping the ball like no one else, nobody's business. Either way, I will be adjusting my rankings as the next 2 weeks unfold. I've been waiting to release these preseason rankings because I know injuries happen, and they happen a lot for the running back position, which we released yesterday. We also talked about quarterbacks yesterday, so go check out those videos. After this one, I'll be linking them down below. And I'll have my rankings down below in case you don't want to watch the whole video. Have them ranking, and if you want to see how I feel about Tyler Boyd or Michael Thomas, you'll see that down below. But without further ado, let's get into it. We're starting with number 50, Marquez Callaway, who's come on the scene, probably was undrafted in every single fantasy football league, but he showed a real connection with Jameis Winston, number 50 receiver. Probably not taking him all too often, but I'm in. Michael Gallup, if something happens to Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, probably the most talented third receiver on a team in the NFL. Michael Gallup's awesome, but he won't have a lot of fantasy football production unless something happens to the top guys. He'll be good in best ball formats, probably win some people some leagues and DFS leagues, but not someone I'm necessarily targeting in a lot of fantasy football leagues. Jarvis Landry, it's going to be good in PPR leagues, maybe not as good in half PPR. It's the Browns. He's on a team, the Browns, that don't like to throw the ball. They run it a lot more. Marquise Hollywood Brown, be good in best ball format, score some long touchdowns, but he's already banged up this season. Not going to really be taking him. If I'm taking a late round flyer, I'd prefer the guy right above him, Jaylen Waddle, the rookie out of Alabama for the Miami Dolphins. Could be very good, could be very bad, like Henry Ruggs was all last year. Either way, I like Jaylen Waddle, like his skill, and I think Tua and him will have a good connection going into the year. I'm in. Curtis Samuel, the goal line back. Now, I say that as a joke because he stole a lot of goal line touchdowns for when he was on the Carolina Panthers. I think he'll have a role on the Washington football team. What that role will be, I don't know. This could be a guy that goes from 45 to like 25, 30, or he's just going to fall out of the top 50 receivers. But don't mind him as a late round flyer. Same for Will Fuller, the 5th. Now, Will Fuller will be suspended week 1, so don't start him that week. But Will Fuller, like a late round flyer kind of guy, not too high on him this season because there's like Devontae Parker and Jaylen Waddle, number 46. I don't know. The Dolphins are a weird team. Obviously got Myles Gaskin too, Mike Gesicki. They got a lot of mouths to feed. Now, whether Tua can get him the ball is really the question. Now we got Marvin Jones Jr. at 43. He had a very good connection. Don't love the injury that he had. I think it was an AC sprain or something along those in his shoulder. Still do think he'll be a very good fantasy football receiver. Just maybe not. I mean, that's what he has been. And you think about how consistent he is. He'll be a good red zone target for Trevor Lawrence. I think he'll score a lot of touchdowns, but he might be more touchdown dependent than a fantasy reliable receiver every single week. Devante Smith probably should be higher than this, but if you ever do your rankings, consider doing your own rankings, and you'll see I could probably put Devante Smith over like 8 of these guys, and that wouldn't surprise me. Devante Smith, very underrated this year. I think he'll have a very good fantasy football season, just like the guy above him, Antonio Brown, one of the most underrated guys. I think will be a great value in the 41st running wide receiver off the board. I do think he'll be pretty good in fantasy football, but like I said, Mike Evans and obviously Chris Godwin out there, Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, Leonard Fournette, Ronald. Yeah, there's a lot of mouths to feed down in Tampa. Now, Mike Williams, my sleeper of the year. Mike Williams is going to have a good fantasy football year, and you'll see my 5 bold predictions video. Should be coming out, I believe. I don't know, maybe tomorrow. Maybe you'll see that tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow, our first ever podcast. So make sure you check that out. First ever podcast will be coming out. So make sure you do that. Make sure you click that subscribe button, too, if you haven't already. Moving on to the top 40. We obviously talked about Mike Williams, number 39. Corey Davis of my New York Jets. Very good in fantasy football. Probably be on my NFL Week 1 player props to bet on. Corey Davis, he's got a good target with Zach Wilson, good connection. He'll be very good in fantasy football and very high floor, I think. So he's going to get targeted like crazy. I guarantee you that. He'll have like a 25-30% target share. Just keep him healthy. DJ Chark, Jr., love him. But Trevor Lawrence will be getting the ball to these guys. Not my highest ranked Jaguars wide receiver. You see that guy at number 35. We'll get to him in a second. Number 37, Jerry Jeudy. People are expecting big things out of him this season. I'm going to say hold your horses right now. Be a little stable. I'm just not in necessarily on this Broncos offense. Teddy Bridgewater did produce a very fantasy-friendly offense last year in Carolina, but not something I'm necessarily targeting. Jerry Jeudy, I think he's going a little higher than I would like in fantasy football drafts. Do like Courtland Sutton a lot more than him, and you'll see that reflected in the rankings when we get to the 20s and 30s range. Moving on, Kenny Golladay. Yeah, he's probably going off the board at like wide receiver 27. Yeah, no, I'm out. Daniel Jones, no thanks. You can keep that. I'm not going to be relying on Kenny Golladay. Being overdrafted in leagues, I think he's around the 35, 30 bets. 30. He's a wide receiver 3 or 4 at best. Not in on him. Laviska Shenault, I guarantee you, top 30 wide receiver this year. Just don't have him above that, but I guarantee you he would do that, especially in PPR leagues. Watch out for Laviska Shenault. Probably be trying to snag him onto teams if I can. Brandon Cooks, number 34, probably the highest target share out of anyone on this list. Only problem is he's on the Texans, and Tyrod Taylor will be throwing in the ball. I do think Brandon Cooks is in for a lot of targets, but he might be getting the number one cornerback, and who knows if those targets are going to be even close to him. But Brandon Cooks will be a fantasy useful receiver this year. Just whether or not how useful he will be. It's going to be an interesting year down in Houston. Maybe he gets traded to use a team that needs him. Deebo Samuel, going to be very good in PPR leagues. Maybe half PPR is kind of If you're in a standard league, probably would drop Deebo Samuel very far down. But Deebo Samuel, there's just a lot of mouths to feed. I've said that a couple times. I mean, he's on this 49ers team that, one, likes to run the ball, and two, they already got Brandon Aiyuk and George Kittle right above him. It's hard. But I do like Deebo Samuel in fantasy football. He's a good value because right now he's getting drafted as like the 41st receiver off the board. But I got him ranked 33. I think he's a good value. Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham Jr., Chase Claypool, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, all these guys in the same division. Let's kind of break them down. Odell Beckham Jr., this is a make or break year for him. If he doesn't do very well this year or gets another injury, I guarantee you the Browns will let go of him or get rid of him or go somewhere else. But I think he'll have a good fantasy football year. Juju Smith-Schuster, very good in PPR leagues. Not going to get targeted a ton, necessarily far down the field, but he'll get some targets, get a bunch of receptions like he did all last year. Chase Claypool, feel like more touchdown dependent, but I think he'll have a better role than he did all last year, where he had a ton of touchdowns, but not a ton of catches. I think he'll have a bigger role this year. Hopefully the injuries that passed him that he had in the first preseason Hall of Fame game, I think he'll be better. Jamar Chase been dropping the ball like no one's business. Man, Jamar Chase, I think he'll be better towards the second half of the year. I even told you he was one of my favorite players to avoid in fantasy football drafts because he was getting drafted too high, like wide receiver 21, 22 off the board. No, I said no, but now he's down closer to like the 28th receiver off the board. Don't mind him taking there. This is the guy that was been out of football for like a year and a half. He's obviously not going to be in full football shape. I think he'll be better this year towards the back half of the year. Not like an Odell Beckham Jr., like crazy off the scene his rookie year where he missed the first like 5 games and then came on the second half of the year and was rookie of the year basically. But I think I'll have a good fantasy football year. Tyler Boyd, steal of the draft. Mark my words. Tyler Boyd, very good. Tyler Boyd will be very good in fantasy football, especially PPR leagues. Joe Burrow loves the slot, and I think Joe Burrow will be targeting Tyler Boyd. People forget Tyler Boyd was like wide receiver 11 through 10 games last year. I think he'll be back into the top 20 wide receivers this year. Yeah, you're getting good value because he's being drafted as like 35th best wide receiver. Courtland Sutton, Broncos, I think will be the number one target here. Courtland Sutton, I think, due for a bounce back year after tearing his ACL last year. Basically, I think in the first or second game of the season. Michael Thomas, question marks surrounding him. I've moved him up to 26 because one, I don't think he misses a ton of games to start this season. And two, Jameis Winston's out there, and I think that is very good for Michael Thomas. Jameis Winston, not afraid to take shots. Michael Thomas, one of the best receivers in the game, and he needs to wake some people back up because people are sleeping on him. He's going like wide receiver 34 off the board. I don't think he ain't that bad. T. Higgins, best Bengals wide receiver in fantasy football. Tyler Boyd is arguably the best value at his ADP. T. Higgins, I think, will be the best fantasy football receiver for the Bengals this season. Great rookie year. Will he do even bigger things in his sophomore year? Moving on, top 25, Robbie Anderson. I talked about him yesterday in my on Sunday in my favorite players to target in fantasy football. Robbie Anderson will be a borderline top 20 wide receiver this year. It is going as like wide receiver 30. He was wide receiver 19 last year. I'm in. Tyler Lockett will do better than his current ADP and probably than his rankings, but he's going to be the most frustrating guy in the league. I've talked about him tons and tons of times. He's got Boomer Bust. That's his nickname. Tyler Boomer Bust Lockett. Take him if you want to be frustrated every week. Brandon Aiyuk, a lot of people are high on him, and I do like him this year. Like him as my favorite 49ers receiver, that is. I mean, it's only really him or Deebo Samuel, but we'll see. He did have a very good killer end of the year last year, but I don't know, with Jimmy G, who knows about this receiving? And I think their team, their offense, and their defense will be a lot better than last year, where they really are trying to catch up in a lot of games. Obviously, a run-first team. Still, very good fantasy football wide receiver. Julio Jones, lowest has ever been in his career, probably. But he'd still be good with the Tennessee Titans. Problem is they don't throw it all too much. DJ Moore, similar to Robbie Anderson. I think Sam Darnold, if you watch my QB rankings video, I have Sam Darnold higher than basically every other fantasy football analyst out there. I think DJ Moore will have a very good season this year. Better than people might anticipate. Adam Thielen, don't love him at his current ADP, going around wide receiver 16. We're in the top 20 now. Adam Thielen, very touchdown dependent, it seemed. Now Kirk Cousins, he's his favorite target, so that helps in the touchdown department. But I'm not necessarily on the Adam Thielen train at his current ADP. Cooper Kupp, Probably going to have close to 100 receptions this year with Matthew Stafford. Love him. Top 18 receiver. I'm in. If I can get Cooper Kupp onto my team, I'm down. A couple spots below Robert Woods, his other teammate. Robert Woods, top 15 receiver. About as consistent as they come. Basically finishes as wide receiver 12, 13, or 14 every single year. Chris Godwin, number 16. Deonte Johnson, number 17. As long as Deonte can catch the ball, he's going to get a lot of targets. He'll be very good in fantasy football. Chris Godwin, second target on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, but Chris Godwin, very good fantasy football QB, or very fair fantasy football QB or wide receiver. I think Chris Godwin would be due for another fantasy football relevant season. Very good in fantasy football. There's a reason he's top 16 wide receivers. Talk about Robert Woods. Mike Evans, I think he'll be better, but I think the guys above him have a higher target share than he did. I think last year only like 18 or 19% target share, just because there's so many other guys with a full season for Antonio Brown. Don't love it. Mike Evans will score a lot of touchdowns, and that's probably bail him out for a lot of weeks in fantasy football, but just not someone I'm necessarily wanting to target. And still don't mind Robert Woods, maybe above him, but I'm still going to keep Mike Evans just because I think he'll finish as a top with more fantasy points than Robert Woods, just will be more touchdowns than Robert Woods. Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry. I'm in on Scary Terry. He's going to have a big target share. Fitzpatrick's going to be chucking it deep every game. I'm in. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. They're not being drafted like this. CeeDee Lamb's getting drafted 4 or 5, I think 8 to 10 picks before Amari Cooper, but I think Amari Cooper will have more fantasy points by the end of the season. Just think he's a better value than CeeDee Lamb at the moment. But CeeDee Lamb's a breakout star this year. I'm in on both of those guys. Allen Robinson, bona fide number 1. He's a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. This guy's going to have a crazy target share, and I love him at his current ADP. A.J. Brown, I'm a little lower than him on his current ADP, currently going as wide receiver 6 or 7 off the board. Now, I don't mind him. I just think the injuries are kind of pile up, and he might miss some games like he did last year. I don't want a guy playing through injuries every single week, having the Q tag next to him, next to his name in fantasy football. But don't mind taking A.J. Brown, still wide receiver 1. Just, he's on a team that doesn't love to throw the ball. He's still going to have a big target share, but just not a guy I'm targeting a lot. DK Metcalf, well, Justin Jefferson, then DK Metcalf. Both these guys, I mean, all these guys are studs. If you can get any of them on your team, I don't mind them. We're grasping at straws at the moment. But Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 1 on the Minnesota Vikings. I think he's going to be much better than he was last. Well, not much better, because it's hard to be better than he was last year. But Justin Jefferson will learn more, will become better in the offense, and he'll have another very good fantasy football campaign. DK Metcalf, I mean, what do you want me to say about him? This man's an absolute freak. I mean, that's not even supposed to be rude. This guy's an athletic specimen. I love DK Metcalf. You can get him on your team if you want to stack him with Russell Wilson. Don't mind doing that. Keenan Allen, having about 3 or 4 spots higher than people think. Keenan Allen, especially in PPR leagues, absolute beast. I think he's going to have a very good season with Justin Herbert. He saw 10.5 targets per game last year. As long as he can stay healthy, he's going to see another 10, 11 targets a game. He's going to be catching the ball. And this Chargers defense, although getting back some key pieces, don't think they'll be as good as people might think. Still give up some points. And Justin Herbert's not afraid of throwing the ball deep or even throwing it, just looking, and boom, Keenan Allen every single time. Rinse and repeat. Calvin Ridley, one of the guys here, could be wide receiver 1. Wouldn't surprise me. I think he's being an absolute, he's kind of a steal, but it's Calvin Ridley. He's going in the top 3, 4 rounds in fantasy football. Probably no, not even 4. He's definitely going in the top 3 rounds. Calvin Ridley, love him in fantasy. DeAndre Hopkins, Stefon Diggs. I mean, these guys are beasts. I mean, Tyreek Hill, you're kind of grasping at straws. Tyreek Hill, I think, will have more touchdowns than Stefon Diggs. If you're in PPR leagues, don't mind taking Stefon Diggs over Tyreek Hill, just because Tyreek's not going to get as many receptions as a guy like Stefon Diggs, or even a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, but he'll have more touchdowns at both of those just because he plays with Patrick Mahomes. Number 1 wide receiver, and it's without question, it's Davante Adams. Although he missed some games last year, I think 2 games, still was wide receiver 1, and by a large margin. This guy's an absolute tank, and he's a touchdown fiend. If you can bet him up to score a touchdown every week, you'll win a lot of money, because that's what he does. He scores touchdowns, and this is like his last dance with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Davante Adams going to be a beast again in fantasy football, and I am in if I can get him. That will wrap up my wide receiver rankings, the top 50. A long video, but I appreciate you for tuning into the whole thing. I'll update it down below if something happens, injuries go down, maybe a player gets traded, who knows. I'll update my rankings, so you can always come back to this video and check it out. It's been Austin. I'll catch you guys again tomorrow. Go check out my tight end rankings posted today. Tomorrow, we got our first ever podcast, so make sure you go check out that one. You won't want to miss it. This has been Austin. I'll catch you guys again tomorrow. Peace out.